is that oftentimes when we buy into these narratives, what happens is we end up dehumanizing people. As we forget to look at the humanity of the people that we walk down the street with. I know what it's like to be hated. I know what it's like to be looked down upon because of who you are. And so I am here to protect you and to help give you support to know that you are not hated by everyone.
So we are here with Michael Austin. Michael Austin is with Just Compassion. Just Compassion is an organization in the city of Tigard, but also in Washington County, handling houseless issues and being a shelter for those without homes, specifically in Tigard, but also their expansion is happening right now, which we're going to hear about that hopefully over the next handful of minutes. And so welcome, Michael. We're so grateful that you are here. You are with us during a Sanctuary Sunday where we are talking about subjects that really mean a lot to people, to find out more, to change the narrative of houseless rhetoric and houseless speak, the way that we approach people, talk to people, and care for people. We want to know more from you. So we're really thankful that you're here. Why don't you just give us a little introduction about who you are, what your qualifications are, and what you work toward with Just Compassion.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. Thanks for having me as well. They call me the development director at Just Compassion, but I do a little bit more than that. I do pretty much all the traditional development roles, which is the grant writing, the marketing, and all that stuff. But I actually, as of October of last year, started running all of our housing programs. So I run pretty much all of the concepts of after someone goes into shelter onwards to getting them housed, and then everything that comes after that, which is we call post-housing. So that's getting individuals to what we're hoping is independent living. And I think it's a great concept to kind of give you what houselessness services look like. We like to say we offer an umbrella of services. It really starts with our street outreach team. So those are the individuals that are going out into the streets, identifying individuals who are unhoused, providing them resources at that time, and then hopefully the goal is to get them into shelter. We have one shelter right now in Tigard, and we are expanding. Our current one accommodates 20 individuals overnight, and our new one is going to go up to 60. And then also provide day center services to individuals who just need to come in for a hot meal during the day, a shower, whatever that may need be. After that, we really go from individuals in shelters are connected to case managers, and those are the ones who are helping them get housed. So that kind of goes in a lot of different directions. There's like the traditional ones, which is like permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, and a myriad of little things that live in between that. But the goal is pretty simple, which is to get individuals from the shelter to get them housed on a rental with rental assistance. And there's a voucher that we can talk about a little bit more as well. And then the goal then is then the post-housing stuff, which is hopefully get them to independent living. And each program kind of works a little bit of what that looks like as well.
Awesome. So why are we talking about this? Well, I think you can inform us more about why we need to start talking about this. Why are we talking about this as a group right now? I believe that just with some changes that we've seen politically, but also local changes, time, place, and manner, things have changed when it comes to the houseless conversation over the last, let's say, year. It has changed. Certain ordinances and codes have changed, but also the national narrative as well we want to address. So we have seen an uptick of houseless over the last 5 years. And it seems in the last 6 months, because of something called time, place, and manner, houseless people are not as visible. They might be in different places, tucked away on different pieces of property, maybe even safe lots and such, which can lend itself to better services, or at least a little bit more concentrated help, yet they become less and less visible. So we think that, the houseless crisis or the houseless issues are now taken care of. This is what I hear on the streets too, is it's finally taken care of. We're not seeing them everywhere, quote unquote, anymore. Yet they might just be put in a different place, and therefore to the common person walking around, there's no more issue. We don't need to take care of it, yet that there's a growing issue. So hopefully during this interview, we can talk about some action steps, how we can take, or what we can take, and what has happened in the last years what has led us up to today, I'd like to discuss that. Why have we seen the increase in houselessness? And why don't we just answer that right now? Why in the last 5 years, probably post-COVID, maybe through COVID, why have we seen an increase in houselessness on our streets?
That's, great research is out about that. Specifically, though, there's a difference between like what a root cause of homelessness is, and specifically around region to region, compared to what happens when you see individuals on the street, specifically from a behavioral health and addiction standpoints. But really, the core concept of houselessness and where that originates from is truly affordable housing, and really at the end of the day is housing in general. And it comes in a myriad of different ways. That's when there's less housing, supply and demand, prices go up, individuals can't afford to stay housed. And that's really the core concept of it all. There's research to show in markets that don't have high costs of housing or have a housing surplus, that at the end of the day, housing costs are lower and people have a better way with cheaper support to be able to keep them housed. And that is a big thing that we can also talk about, the difference of keeping people housed instead of trying to rehouse them. The cost effectiveness of, at the end of the day, keeping someone housed is much easier to deal and work with than to rehouse someone. And it also eliminates the trauma that comes with living on the streets. And it also eliminates those increased mental health long-term, lifelong issues that happen, and addiction as well too. Those are all kind of correlated together. And I really have to say that your concept of, as we put people in a shelter and do a good job at doing that, which is great. There's a lot of states out there that actually have shelter required laws. But really all we're doing is recategorizing what homelessness is.
Right.
And so, again, you're exactly right. It's out of sight, out of mind to a certain extent, but it's not really solving the actual problem.
Right.
And what's at the root of it.
So last year there was basically an ordinance that needed to be passed according to the state that was called time, place, and manner. So can you, and then we'll unpack that, or we'll just restate the out of sight, out of mind at the end of this. But time, place, and manner. Can you explain what time, place, and manner is to us?
Yeah, it's just pretty much giving someone a place to stay for a set time period, and where they can. So the grants pass decision obviously is the big crux of this all. So before that, even the Oregon Supreme Court, I should say, allowed individuals specifically to stay wherever they could to a certain extent on public land, so not private land, but allowed them to be able to sleep there, knowing that for them it was kind of a right. And that's something we can also talk about. What do people have rights to housing? We have a right to a lot of things, but should housing be one of those? But yeah, that's basically what time, place, and manner is. And so after the grants pass decision, what you saw in Portland and all over, specifically here in Tigard, we saw a change in the ordinances where they limited where individuals could stay to a very small pieces of land. So in Tigard, there were 3 places that they could stay. And now it is down to 1 small patch of grass on public works. Portland is kind of the similar concepts about where you could stay and limiting the amount of places. But essentially that's what it is. It's to a certain extent trying to tell individuals you can't stay here during these times at this, in these manners as well too. And the manners, I don't think we have a lot of problems with, which is obviously, no open flames,
Right.
like that. But it's the time and place that really make it difficult, because at the end of the day, where do our unsheltered friends go? And then when they end up going back out to where they used to be, which is in more dangerous terrain, then our street outreach individuals makes it harder to have them go out there and find these individuals. And then, at least when they were somewhere that was easy to identify, we could actually engage them and then engage them in services as well.
Absolutely. So that when the ordinances change, they either become very visible out on sidewalks and such, and parks and public lands, that they become very visible. Either they're camping there or staying there through the day, what have you. So they become very visible. As the ordinances change, they become invisible. And just to restate what you were saying, is just because somebody's invisible, like they become invisible to just walking around, they're not invisible. And the problems that surround this issue still exist that need to be addressed. One thing that I want to state is, just because somebody is homeless, houseless, without a home, they're not necessarily the problem. We have lots of systemic issues that surround houselessness that are problems that need to be addressed. So they might have certain challenges, they might have certain issues that they're dealing with personally, but just because somebody is houseless doesn't make them a problem. Michael, tell us why people are living on the streets. What gets them there? What are some common reasons? I know it's a bunch of different reasons, different for everybody. But what are some common themes that you're seeing, especially in our area, Washington County, Portland Metro? Why do people end up on the streets?
Yeah, again, it really does stem a lot from the higher cost of housing in general, rental, but loss of a job, major medical bill. I mean, a lot of individuals who live in the United States are one paycheck away from actually something disastrous happening,
Correct. Yeah.
like falling into, houselessness. It could be also individuals on fixed income. So I think it's about 35% of the individuals in our programming are actually older adults. And I don't make up the ages. I just go by what the federal government tells us, which is 55 plus. But even then, a majority of those people that we have in our programs are more like 65 plus. So on fixed incomes like Social Security, housing has gone up so fast, especially in this area, that at the end of the day, they just can't afford it. And so what we do is our job is to come in and help out. And really, HUD standard is 30% of your income should go to housing specifically. So
Right.
that's kind of where the standard is. And so that's kind of what we do. We come in there, provide rental assistance. So their income, their fixed income at 30%, and then we cover whatever rest of that is to make sure they can stay housed. So that's what our voucher program is. And it's been wildly successful, specifically after SHS, which is Supportive Housing Services. It's a Metro bill that passed in 2020. And that's where the voucher system kind of started from. But this is a really cool system because it's no longer with federal funding. It's actually a regional response to the crisis. And we find it, a lot of our programs are funded through it. And it's been really successful in getting individuals housed and keeping them that way.
So
I have
yeah, go ahead, jump in.
Okay. Something I have heard is that there is often a correlation between houselessness and neurodivergence. And I'm wondering if that's something that you've seen, if it's something that you can speak to, and then what additional supports can be provided to help those folks.
Yeah, and really, I would say that's how prolonging it starts with. So it's really not the cause or the root cause in a lot of instances. Right. It is the prolonging of it. So, I mean, in terms of just broad resources, I'll just speak more broadly to the entire system in general. So again, when you come into shelters or we find you outside, the goal is to eventually connect to someone with case management. And then once they are connected there, that's when all the support services can really wrap around them. And that includes really our case manager's job is to connect them with mental health, addiction, employment services, all of those myriad of things in between. But that's really how kind of the system in general works. And then the goal is all of our programs are also low barrier. And I think that that's something that individuals don't maybe fully understand, and they do at the same time, which is it's a housing first approach. So really the goal is we don't ask for individuals to be clean, sober. We don't ask them to necessarily go and seek medical or counseling or whatever that may be. The research has shown that if we can get people housed first and then try to address those problems second, that it's a little bit more effective in terms of overall cost on the system, but also then reducing the amount of trauma to each individual. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it kind of led into another one I was going to ask, which are some of the reasons that folks might not seek the supports of a shelter. And you kind of touched on that with low barrier housing. But if you wouldn't mind talking about some of those barriers with some of the other shelters too.
Yeah, low barrier is great because again, we don't really require anything. But the problem is shelters can be, I'll be frank, we have a shelter, it's a congregate shelter, but they've been shown to be highly ineffective. They're difficult environments at times. So our new shelter, we specifically use some of that research to break up how we congregate people instead of one big area or even separate rooms. It's more of a community living and smaller amount of people in there. And that's helpful. But congregate shelters are difficult because, you're living with other people on a daily basis.
Right.
So a lot of individuals don't want that. They want the freedom of being outside. They want they're able to be in their tent and do their own things on a daily basis. Whereas at the end of the day, when they feel like they're in the shelter and progressing in those, in the system to a certain extent, they're almost required to be a part of it. And I think that sometimes for individuals who've been really fearful of the system, or say maybe they feel like the system failed them, which a lot of individuals do, they have a hard time trusting it again.
Yeah.
And so, then when they're in our shelters for a long period of time because it's difficult to get them housing or whatever it may be, then they start losing trust again. But you can see how this can all be kind of a repetitive and a cycle through it all.
So, Colleen, do you have any questions at this moment just to jump in and ask?
Just trust. Trust is so important. We talked about, for them to report and for them to come to you to begin with, what are some things that you do to build that trust so that you can actually help them?
Yeah, it's really connecting with them. And a big part we try to do is make sure we differentiate ourselves from part of the government, because I think that's where the distrust comes from, right? We do receive government funding, but Just Compassion ourselves is an independent organization, which allows us to be able to be a little bit more independent from those concepts. And so we never go out there with PD or police department or anybody from there as well, or TVFNR, the fire department. Our goal is really to go out there as ourselves. And I think that's where the trust starts getting built from the get-go. And then it's also being successful. If we can progress people through the system and doing that, that's, that does build trust. At times it can be very difficult, but at times it does work out. And our goal at Just Compassion is to ensure that as long as they want to engage and continuously try in the process, we are always going to be there as well too. Some people don't, and we're going to still try to be there for them as well. But not everybody is at that level that they're ready to be housed yet. And I think that we as a community need to understand that there is a lot that goes along with that, like behavioral health, addiction, and what those entail, because I can tell great stories of that and that success stories from those and kind of the underlying issues. But I think that we just need to start understanding that some of this is going to take time. And even though we are making it less visible, and that is a big part of the system, the next part's going to take time. And we might see more individuals go back outside and with where, regardless of your political affiliation, inflation hurt the system regardless. It hurt individuals. It's higher cost of living in general, which then less money to go to rent. So it hurt the system. And so we need to understand that this is kind of where we're at right now. And we needed to take the time to process this and allowing that we've only really been at this with the SHS funding since 2020. So we just need a little bit more time to progress and work these kinks out in the system, I would say.
And trust is a huge issue when it comes to any marginalized people group, because when you have been, I guess, listed or chased after or gotten in trouble for reporting yourself or trying to go for services, or just the fear of that reminds me of the immigrant conversation or the refugee conversation, where immigrants that are not documented, they have different pathways, not many, but some different pathways, getting, it seems like, slimmer right now, but some pathways forward. Yet do they go to the office and actually report themselves? What's going to happen if I go to, that happened to somebody that was a personal friend of mine that was houseless. I took him to Just Compassion, and he just couldn't overcome that fear that he had, that he was going to get in trouble somehow by being there or being checked in, even giving his name and, signing up for OHP or something. He was going to get in trouble for
and these,
just being houseless.
And again, political affiliation aside, I'm trying to here, but these ICE raids on facilities like in Chicago, which has had an historic, it has the background of Chicago and race in general has a long history,
Right.
But just in general, then individuals don't want to go to work. They don't want to be productive. And then now they don't have income. And then they, you can see how that can trickle then to in the end, houselessness as well too. And so,
Sure.
at the end of the day, keeping individuals working is such a big part of what we need to do. It's sad to see that it's almost like we're discouraging that. And I find that hurtful for the system in general.
So you have Seattle and Portland and San Francisco, Sacramento, Los Angeles. It seems like the West Coast accusation is we do not take care of our houseless. We have problems. Look at all the homeless people out on the street. Yet, I mean, if you just use some common sense, these are major people epicenters, large production, a majority of the GDP comes out of our major centers. So it makes sense that there's more services. Are there any other reasons besides housing that you can see why do these major centers of population have is it just population? Is it just statistics? Is it just the housing increase in costs? Is there more than just their services here and the increase in housing costs?
I think, I think there's a myriad of reasons. Obviously, individuals fall into houselessness, and I think bad luck being maybe at the top of that list in general. But I think the solution to it really does lie in housing. And in the end, we're going to come to a reckoning here in the metro area, which is, do we want to open up our urban growth boundary? And if we do that, do we want to then provide that for just affordable housing? So long ago, we were supposed to, any new construction, we were supposed to provide X amount of affordable units to go along with that. That was never enforced. And so we were wondering why we're in this problem. Well, it's because of things like that, unfortunately. But we need to really look at this holistically, I think, as the metro area and really, even say tomorrow we were like, okay, we're going to make affordable housing. Here's exactly where it's going to go. It's going to take 5-7 years to get that the available units that we need to really solve the problem. So then it's like, what can we do in the meantime to stop people from falling into houselessness? I always like to say it's my favorite statistic, which is people come to ask me, can we solve the crisis? My answer is yes. If we stopped everybody who is currently housed today from falling into houselessness. Because at the end of the day, the resources that we have and we can provide, we can't get people into housing fast enough, then they're falling out of housing.
Got it.
That is a difficult conversation for when people really understand it. We're getting a little bit better at that. Homeless prevention services, which is making sure people don't fall into that. But even then, the funding for that is not up to where it needs to be.
That makes a lot of sense. When you have more people falling into housing than you can get people into housing, there's just going to be a perpetual challenge there.
Yeah, well, let's house one and lose one. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Or house one and
lose
two. Right. Yeah. Well, let's talk about the hateful rhetoric. I know there's a lot of hate rhetoric around just any marginalized person. There's a lot of hate rhetoric that comes from just people. And part of it is lack of understanding, I would say, or just getting on the wrong algorithm, news feed, whatever it is that they're listening to a constant stream of one side of the story. So the hate rhetoric that I hear, maybe you hear more, but the clickbait, the stuff that you get online and you click that and it leads you down this rabbit hole of what I call the rabbit hole of stupid. Are houseless people lazy? Are houseless people uninterested in working? Are houseless people all on drugs? Are all houseless people mentally ill? Those are the things that we hear. So when we talk about that and attempt to just put some data in front of us with those things.
Yeah. I'll unpack. Let's start with mental health and addiction, because I think that's a good place to originally start with, which is, is everybody an addict out there? Well, the fentanyl crisis, obviously, especially during the pandemic, took a major ramp up. I mean, at the end of the day, seeing the amount of people that died from fentanyl, it was rampant on the streets, and it still is. It's really cheap. Just had
a friend overdose 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry.
He survived, but he did overdose and got Narcan. Yeah, it was pretty bad.
Yeah. So quite a bit of individuals out there are using some, whether that's meth, marijuana, alcohol, fentanyl, to what I would say numb to a certain extent the pain of what is going on. A lot of these individuals, specifically during this time of year when it's really dark outside, difficult, cold, they do use drugs. Yes, and there was a great story that I was able to do. KBOO came out and talked to our shelter, and I got to hear 3 individuals talk about their recovery story and what that looked like. One individual, he was got hurt on the job, got prescribed opioids from his doctor. One of those tragic things where that's how it started. He was like, I don't blame the doctor. And at the end of the day, it progressed and it became heroin at the end of it all. And it was a tough time, a couple jail stints, and then coming back out into his crisis as well. But the moment he got into our shelter at Just Compassion was the moment he stopped, and he's been clean for 1 year. Another individual, same concept, where he was outside not knowing where his next place to sleep was, not understanding, where his next meal was going to come from, and that he just wanted to numb the pain somehow, numb it all. And he used meth as that coping mechanism. We all, after a hard day of work, sometimes go home and maybe have a drink, or, maybe do, eat that brownie that's been sitting on the counter. And so sometimes that's kind of how this works, right? And for them, that's the way that they numb their pains. But for him, again, the shelter, once he really finally found himself a permanent bed there, he's been clean now. At that time, he was clean for 3 months. So those, showing what it looks like without housing in general, without a shelter, I think that's really where I see it as. I wouldn't say it's the predominant amount of people who are out there either who are addicted, but we are seeing higher levels of mental health, individuals who are outside in the elements as well. That just comes with, being isolated and then not having individuals around you to help you and feeling like at the end of the day, the system is failing you to a certain extent. Those mental health become really severe. And then at times it does mix with addiction. And so we're seeing a lot of dual diagnosis coming from individuals through the system, which is another reason just to point out keeping someone housed, how important that can be. Because all of those things, the addiction, the mental health, the severity of it all really did happen on the streets. It didn't happen prior. It really mostly does happen and prolongs their stint as, in houselessness.
So it makes a lot of sense because we have a national mental health crisis. I mean, we actually have Mental Health Month as a nation. So it's obvious that it's on the radar. Maybe people are afraid to talk about it, but it still exists at a national level. You start adding in barriers, whether it be financial or just situation in life or hiding or any kind of ism that you have, like an addiction, alcoholism. And then you add more barriers of now I'm houseless. Now I have this pressure on me. It makes complete sense that there would be an increase of mental illness in the more marginalized, the more less access you have. It just is going to lend itself to an increase.
And a big reason I bring this up is mostly just to humanize it again, right?
Right.
And I think that's we are all humans and we all have our ups and downs in life. These individuals have fallen on a really tough time. And again, it probably came from bad luck, loss of a job, or a health bill that came too high. I think we can all understand that. And I think when we start to really break it down to these are people, and at the end of the day, I have more people coming to me asking for help than I have people providing help and saying no.
Right.
So at this point, until I really feel like we've come to that inflection where, if there are individuals that it is true, I'll say this, there are individuals who do want to stay outside. It is their choice. It's kind of where they're at in life. Whether that's, they want to do the same in a year from now, it might not be. But the system is overflown with individuals who want help. I mean, I think our rapid rehousing program in the county, just Washington County, was 500 people. So that's the referral list. So that's how many people want help.
Well, let's continue our conversation in the realm of poverty. We have just a couple of more topics to discuss today, and then we can wrap up. Poverty is a general term. It kind of is an umbrella term that covers a lot of different levels and subject matter within the idea. So, Michael? Can you describe for us what is poverty? Where do we actually see poverty? Physical, financial. I know that we use the term metaphorically as well when it comes to, mental poverty or spiritual poverty as well. I'm talking about, the subject at hand. So what is poverty? What are some levels of poverty? And then Sharia, you just share this conversation with Michael and talk to us about poverty.
Yeah, and so I'll start with, it's this term average median income. We call it the AMI. That's really an index of where households are in a specific region. And there is great research that is done by HUD and a lot of places to show what that is. So anybody that is below 30% of that AMI, that would be pretty much impoverished. And then there's really people who there's a scale there, right? So 0, it would mean that you're extremely impoverished, and the different types of resources that are needed around that. It also tells you which program individuals can go into and what that looks like as well. Then there's the kind of the next level up, which is 30 to 50% of the AMI. So these are individuals that maybe have a little bit more of an income, but are still really struggling kind of paycheck to paycheck. So that's kind of, really, when you look at the numbers and look at it, they do a decent job at showing you what the average median income is, but maybe not necessarily everything that can go into that in terms of like food, children, yes, it does go up a little bit for that, but does it really provide enough? I'm not really sure, but I think it does a good job, I'll say, overall in terms of giving us an idea of where people are at on that spectrum, I should say.
Okay. So I have a question about how that's calculated then. Can you speak to our area and so it's an average. So if you were to have, a billionaire in the area, that would really skew what the average is, right? So how does that affect the way these numbers are calculated for everyone else?
And now I'm going to say I'm not an expert in this area, but I do believe that some of it is taken based on what they believe the average rental price is, average food price. I think that's more what it's built into, not necessarily the billionaires and but I think it's just based on what that concept is, and so what it takes to live here on an average income. And then, like I said, when you get children into it, it does raise it, but I don't think it necessarily raises it appropriately.
Okay. So what are ways that we are able to keep people out of poverty?
Wow. Yeah.
Do you have
question.
another hour?
Yeah, exactly. Keeping people in jobs. I mean, really, at the end of the day, that is the way to do it. And, I've talked about rental prices as well, too, enough, but obviously that is a big part of it as well. Like I said, the HUD standard is individuals want to be spending 30% of their income on housing. So anytime over that, that's really when you're coming into some deficits. People really, the main things are first. You want to make sure that you have food, water, and then comes shelter, right? And so it kind of comes in those ranges. And sometimes people let go of food and do shelter instead, and then that becomes its own problem. And then at some point, you can't sacrifice food. You're gonna need you need it. I've heard families who are eating, sometimes sticks of butter, to get by, and that stuff is really, really, really sad. Even with the provided services of like SNAP benefits or EBT or whatever it may be, some type of nutrition support, it's still never enough to counteract housing at the end of it all. And while we provide so much great support and think that people, we give a right to people for so many things, and especially food being one of them, right? That's why we have all these great programs for that. Housing's not one of them. And so we don't have a right to be housed and a right to be sheltered. And I think that, I've gone back to that well 100 times, but I think that's really where the research is pointing us to, showing that if we can make housing a human right, specifically in the United States, that we can really then relook at how we allocate our housing and how we look at this, and whether single family homes and building those is really the most efficient way of doing those things. Maybe we do have to look at getting rid of the white picket fence concept of what Americanism is, and look at different structures and ensuring we can house more individuals at the right, providing enough, and then also at the same time not destroying the environment around us, right? And so there's that weird concept of being like, I talked about expanding the urban growth boundary, but it's like, do that, you get into those lands as well.
Right.
Yeah,
Correct. Yeah.
Going down poverty back into rental assistance, but I think that's kind of what it is. And so many individuals live paycheck to paycheck, and one small mistake, and then next thing you know, you're houseless.
And the affordable housing conversation, I know a developer that predominantly works on affordable housing, and there are enormous barriers to that as well. So like to just be enormous. I'm just in conversation. I'm like, the stress that this person is just to get a housing development done, to get people housed, is. And this person has a good heart. They want to do it. They want to be involved in the work. They want affordable housing built, apartment buildings, but just to overcome certain there are challenges, layers upon layers of even the development side of this. The big money stuff there's huge barriers to it too.
And at the end of the day, I think that's kind of exactly right. And while I would love to say the state of Oregon or a specific area could tackle affordable housing, it's just not feasible in terms of money. It really has to come from the federal government.
Well, let's move into community, like specifically our communities. You're in Tigard. Some of us are in Sherwood. And Sherwood is seen as this sheltered little place where we're all house broke, where we spent all this money on our houses and we have no money for anything else. So that's where a lot of people are at in Sherwood. And houseless people are moved along, it seems like, in Sherwood, just to be honest. It's like they're moved along. So houselessness is not necessarily so visible in Sherwood. And so where do we actually see houselessness in communities like ours? Like it seems like they're invisible. So are they couch surfing? Are they trying to find a floor somewhere? Where do we actually see houses? Because just every once in a while, you'll see somebody walking the streets, or they'll be camped out by a building, and it seems like within an hour they're moved along. So how about for communities like Sherwood, or even like Lake O or West Lynn, some of
Right.
these even wealthier communities out there? What are you seeing in our places?
Yeah, we are seeing an encouragement for individuals to move on. And really that comes back to the grants pass decision and time, place, and manner, where at the end
Yeah.
of the day, they just don't allow individuals. So when, local authorities see that individuals potentially houseless, they usually are quick to get on that and then maybe relocate them, let's put it that way, drive them to maybe a boundary. And I don't want to say that, I'll say this, I'm speaking in this capacity as myself for this comment, not as the organization. But I think that we've seen that those core concepts of pushing out houseless individuals from communities, and it just puts more stress on the entire system, because then it goes to other communities, puts more stress there as well too. Where I would like to see is just a more holistic response, right? This is a regional crisis. It's not city by city. And if you want to call it a state crisis, I think that's fine as well. I think there's different areas, the metro area, the urban populations, and the rural areas, they're all different, right? And how you can tackle and handle these issues. But maybe they're staying down by rivers as well too. Maybe they're in forest areas. That's very plausible. But at the end of the day, they also then congregate towards places that have services. And so cities that don't offer types of services for their houseless individuals, at the end of the day, it just discourages them from staying there.
Colleen, you have been in the school district for a long time. So jump in on that conversation when it comes to the share center and houseless kids. Like what is some things that you've seen over the years? Because you've been in the district or were in the district for quite some time. So what have you seen? You are muted at this moment. Yeah.
So I've been both in Sherwood and Tigard-Tualatin. And something you said really hit me, is that if we can keep people in homes opposed to after they've already left. And I've just seen how different, like a school community has helped support a family to be able to remain in a home or give them some support. We've got Share Center. One time as teachers, we just found out about what kind of services were all available, that we were in for food and for support in
clothing and such. Yeah.
Yeah. So if we're listening to this, I think anyone who is interested, what can I do to help? What can we do to help the people that are already in housing but could be on the edge of maybe losing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. First off, TTSD does an amazing job. I love the Tigard-Tualatin School District and what they're doing. So great team over there, and they do fantastic stuff. Come out and support, help us in any way we can. I think at the end of the day, talking to organizations like us, like Just Compassion or Family Promise, anybody who's out there, I can just name a few throughout the entire county: Open Door, Project Homeless Connect, any of those people who are providing the services, come and ask us those questions. Or one, you can come help us in our beautiful new facility and volunteer and do things like that. But maybe even these faith-based organizations that we've been getting in contact with and really talking to, before 2020, it was really the faith-based community that helped these individuals. And now afterwards, the money that has been coming around here is allowing organizations to build up and provide more clinical support and things like that. So it's been able to move away from the faith-based communities, which is, a good thing. But then the faith-based communities are wondering, what can we do to help? And I think, connecting with them again and coming into that concept of being like, maybe we can do donation drives, if we're looking for something specific, maybe it's fundraising events that we can do together. Really, there are certain things that we don't have allocated funding for that would be really helpful to have allocated funding for, like emergency hotel rooms and stays. We don't have that type of support all the time. So if we can collectively come together and figure those things out, and then just, I really believe in what we call collaborative governance. And while it's a nice term, it's actually like rooted in so many things, but it really does involve the community in general coming together, discussing these things. Because maybe all my ideas, I've been around Just Compassion now for a year, but maybe everything that I have here, I can provide to someone, and maybe they'll, have a concept of maybe how can I make that work? Oh, I know how, right? I think that's really cool. And so the podcast here today, hopefully someone hears something and is like, what, I know how to solve that issue, or I know how to help out with that, or whatever it may be. So
Right.
That's a great question though. Yeah, no, I've got great stories, and there's ones of street outreach teams going down cliff sides to pull out somebody who was in a medical emergency. Just yesterday, there was a family, a 9-year-old who was outside, and we were able to find them a hotel room for the night. I've got a lot of those, but my favorite thing really in the end is on Friday around this table that I'm actually sitting at, we do what we call weekly positives, where all of our case managers come together, an entire team, street outreach, shelter, and we do talk about our positives and what's going on, not only professionally, but even personally as well too. And I think that again, it's humanizing the concepts again and showing that at the end of the day, we do deal with a lot of tough and difficult things, but there are success stories every day that come to this table and positives that do get taken from that. And I think that is cool to see. And my real thing at the end of this all is just to say, it might look daunting, it might be really difficult, and it might be really hard over the next couple of years, but let's keep holding on to those little success stories. Let's keep progressing forward. Let's keep working together, collaborating, whatever that may be, because, at the end of the day, I think that's what's going to help us continue and solve this crisis, and hopefully it is solvable is my hope. But whatever it is, my goal is to be here and do that work every day, and our team as well too, and until we can try to do that. So, yeah.
Awesome. Michael Austin is the development director for Just Compassion. Kind of sounds like a fancy title for somebody who just loves homeless people. And we're thankful that you do love them and that you are in the work